Alright, chat. Dandadan opening is really with
Absurd,
references.
fast-paced, eclectic
Check it
blend
out.
of influences that smashes together the supernatural and the extraterrestrial
Okay.
into a strangely cohesive whole that's
Well, I've been
steeped in
loving
a wide
Dandadan.
selection of
Not gonna
references
lie.
and inspiration. And this aromatic blend manages to stay amalgamated despite its obsession with combining not only sharply contrasting color schemes but also diverging animation techniques and aesthetics. And its opening sequence, directed and storyboarded by Scott Pilgrim Takes Off director Abel Gongora, set to Otonoke by Creepy Nuts, is a perfect quintessence of that
The banger
identity.
of an
From the
opening.
stylistic choices in animation to the 22 trillion references to other art and media to the song itself. So let's make like spider cartographers and map out this tangled web of references and inspiration before diving deeper into the technical aspects of the animation and what makes it so good. Like the show itself, the opening drops us straight into the middle of the action right from the jump with these quickly cut close-ups that introduce us to the characters and to the strikingly vibrant color palettes that are coming. Each cut is restricted to just two major hues from opposite sides of the color
does have
wheel,
like a very
and we're
interesting
also
color
already
scheme, though.
subtly combining elements from different eras of media too. These shots of the syllable dawn in different typefaces are mostly displayed on LCD screens, but the character close-ups and most of the rest of the opening going forward give the impression of analog film with soft edges between highlight and shadow and overlaid grain, scratches, and imperfections. Sci-fi morphs seamlessly into horror with Turbo Granny's eye here, which as always is rendered in a loose, scratchy, organic style that almost feels like the orange glow is physically shining from behind the artwork and tinging these thin edges towards red like they're slightly translucent. Then red to blue were with the Serpoians and a third completely different art style. The bold geometric silhouettes clearly harken back to 60s pop art and cutout animation. Most obviously, one of the two major inspirations for the manga, Ultraman, and its opening sequence from 1967, from which parts of the Serpoian design are also borrowed.
It does
What,
look
while
similar.
we're on the topic of the two major inspirations for the manga, and I swear this will loop back around, mark my words. Are you taking notes? Did you even bring your notebook? I gotta at least acknowledge this absolute bangsman of a track by my boys Creepy Nuts. I promise this won't become a music analysis channel, but just give me a couple minutes for a brief detour, because this song props up the themes of the show just as much as the animation does, and it would be a felony to not at least mention it, and
Okay, let's see what he says about this.
I may
Kinda
never
interesting.
outrun the long arm of the law. These lovely gentlemen have been running the table lately, with one anime opening after another, even rivaling the likes of King Nu at this point. And when I saw they'd be doing this opening, I knew it would be perfect. I was first made aware of these bozos when they did the opening
They've
for
been
Call of the Night in
making
2022.
moves.
But I don't think they ever have or ever will land another gig for which their band name fits more perfectly than this one. If you were to ask me to sum up Dandadan in just two words, I think those words would be creepy and nuts, in two different senses of the word nuts even. With that in mind, I fully expect Creepy Nuts to show up in the show at some point, like they did in Call of the Night. I don't know how many people watch that show, but they're just in it. They just show up. So if that doesn't happen again,
do?
Sayasaru will be hearing from my massive legal team. I couldn't think of a better way to represent the general vibe of this show than to take the semi-nonsensical, semi-onomatopoeic title Dandadan and turn it into these syncopated percussive vocal triplets that lead into an insanely energetic cacophony of fast-paced hip-hop stylings and wacky esoteric samples that pay homage to the way the show itself samples bits and pieces from pulp action and horror movies and TV. Initially, some people pointed out that it sounded like they had sampled Pikmin sounds from the game Pikmin. But more recently, Reddit user Dankity Dan picked up on this faint line that's audible in the full version of the song, and discovered that the samples are actually a few extremely sped up lines from a 1915 song called I've Been Floating Down the Old Green River.
Oh, that's
Even the lyrics are swarming with references. The two major inspirations for the manga are obviously Ultraman, like I mentioned before, and the campy horror crossover of The Ring and the Grudge, Sadako vs. Kayako, whose blend of horror and comedy influenced mangaka Yukinobu
That's a
Tatsu
cool
to
sample,
create
actually.
the series in the first place. They also referenced it in Chainsaw Man, by the way. Now, do you think Creepy and Nuts here referenced it in their lyrics too? I'll give you 0.3 seconds to type your answer in the comments down below. Time's up. Yes, they did. Oh wait, sorry, I got them switched around. This one's Nuts, that one's Creepy. If you want to learn more about the show's cinematic influences, by the way, I go way more in depth on them in this video, which you should watch after this one if you haven't seen it already. Or if you have. He also referenced the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Oh,
One Piece and other Shonen Jump hits, M. Night Shyamalan.
Do you hear that gorgeous crispy crunch?
Okay. Their own song from Mashal. And most importantly, 2 different Japanese creepypastas from 2chan, Otsukare-sama deshita and Yamanoke. In Yamanoke, a man's daughter is possessed by a mysterious creature deep in the mountains, and she starts muttering, "I'm inside, I'm inside, I'm inside."
That's
or
creepy as...
Haireta. And what does the author
So many
describe this
references.
mysterious creature as looking like? None other than this jabroni from Ultraman.
I love like the old like 70s.
Which brings us right back here. I told you it would wrap
Like
back
media.
around. You didn't believe in me. I got it. I got it. The texture and rough outlines make these guys look like they're made from stencils. And I especially appreciate the little imperfections in the credit text, as if they've been cut from paper by hand too. And even the subtle camera shake that makes it feel
It
like
looks
this
really
is being
cool, yeah.
filmed on a big chunky camera from the 60s. The animators give the impression of motion with very few frames to keep the feeling of old school cutout
One thing that I
animation,
like about
in this
Dandadan
cut,
is
where the Flatwoods
it's
monster
actually
anticipates for 5 frames
very
before
random,
snapping straight into
like
this final
insanely
position. And I
random,
love the
you
use
know?
of texture to separate the different pieces of the monster. Gongora clearly loves a nice powerful black silhouette with rough textured edges, as you can tell from this cut that he did for Ping Pong the Animation, as well as this suspiciously similar one from the Devilman Crybaby opening, which he also directed. What I assume this commenter is pointing out on my previous video is that this cut looks very similar to this artwork from Czechoslovakian artist Václav Mergel's 1976 short film The Crabs. Maybe there's some
Definitely does a little
inspiration
bit.
there too in the textured orange background, and it's certainly the same mixing bowl of 60s and 70s pop art and cutout animation. By the way, that short is right here on YouTube. I'll link it along with my other sources in the description. Check it out if you want. I recommend it.
Cool.
But I think it's more likely that the direct inspiration is this shot from the Ultraman TV opening again, which came out 9 years earlier. Just like this next cut, in which Momo's earring, colored in this teal that represents her psychic powers in the show, is positioned conveniently over her face in a direct reference to Ultraman's eye in this shot. Turbo Granny's chaotic scribbles return in this transformation, and this beautifully abstract painted cut by key animator Sho
like that,
Oi, whose name you
that
might
scribbles
recognize
reminds
if
me
you've
of-
seen my Dungeon Meshi series for stuff like this crazy image from the Red Dragon fight. What strikes me about this cut though is that there's basically no consistency from one frame to the next in any part of the screen really, but your eye is still able to follow it because of the glowing red eyes that give you an anchor point to focus on. Also, if you compare the original keyframes to the final product, you can see just how much gets done in corrections, effects, and compositing after the key animator is finished. They've changed the base color of her face, and someone's even come in and painted a whole new layer of this turquoise on top to add some color contrast. Who's this fella up here? These cuts provide a brief respite from the frantic energy of the rest of the
Those random
sequence and
cuts
ground the
of,
folklore elements in locations that feel very real. They may look at first glance like
Creepy
fully
Nut song
3D
maker
rendered
for me.
environments, but they're actually made entirely of painted 2D elements layered and composited into 3D space. In this cut by key animator Kyohei Ebata, Momo imitates Rihanna while Okarun and Gigi do the Carlton from Fresh Prince in the background. And if you compare the rough Genga to the corrected version from animation director, not sure how you would say that, you can see that there are some really extreme corrections here that bring the dances closer to their original versions, to the point that you could almost say this cut is really more hers than it is Ebata's. Momo's dance becomes less of an arm type deal and more of a hip and shoulder type deal, and Gigi and Okarun are stepping from side to side now, which they weren't originally. You ever seen toenail cuticles in an anime opening before?
So really
This one's
in-depth
got 'em.
analysis.
These few
of it.
cuts bring back Turbo Granny's rough organic influence as Okarun starts running and transforms into Granny form and does the Devilman run. And while we're at it, a brief correction for my previous video. In that one I said in this cut from an animator for whom this seems to be their first key animation credit, Kenta Ishimori, while this does seem to be the first time he's been credited by that name, I did find evidence that he's also done some work on Scott Pilgrim Takes Off and some really impressive, if very disturbing, individual work under the name Saitoa. This will be in the description too. And possibly also Ryuto Yamagata? I don't know,
So
this
many times
goofball's
people
got like
worked on it,
3
though.
names for some reason. Anyway, he also seems to have done this series of cuts. It's so gestural and impressionistic, it's like he's running so fast that his body is disintegrating right in front of us, right up to the point of the actual transformation. More like Okarun, am I right?
Yeah.
Am I right? His feet bend in impossible ways and even get smeared to the point of fully disconnecting from his
did
legs in
run.
frames like this one. Or this one where his toes curl upward to show just how much force he was pressing into the ground with. And that...
Oh, that's so much detail.
That actually might just be gangrene. I'm not sure. I love the intense foreshortening and doubling going on in this cut. It's easy to miss at full speed, but as Okarun runs, his glasses can barely stay on his face, and the lenses leave after images trailing behind them as they bounce around. His toes even get some after images in this frame, and again, I love how much it looks like he's really pressing into the ground with those exaggerated curves. Okay, that's enough talking about toes. The cleaner character animation style begins to blend together with the stylized cutout approach with these intercut shots. This one by key animator Shun Miyakawa of the characters getting abducted, and this simplified flying saucer
I love this
tractor
image.
beaming the
I
silhouette
don't know why,
of a cow.
it's just
The three
so,
art
like,
styles and
iconic
two
looking.
opposing colors all come together in this climactic cut as this slick, detailed illustration of what appears to be the outside of that spaceship they just got presumably abducted into goes from clean, detailed blue to bold, chaotic red in an instant as Okarun smashes through it, and is interspersed with these three demonic frames that sort of find a middle ground between the bold, textured silhouettes and those loose, scratchy Turbo Granny scribbles. Oh, and this is also yet another Ultraman reference. And we settle into the conclusion,
A lot of Ultraman,
the real
huh?
heart of the story, the relationship between the two protagonists, despite coming from opposite occult worlds and opposite sides of the physical screen in this cut. Okay, like the video
That's
if you
pretty
want,
cool.
subscribe if you want
Chat,
more, go watch
amazing
this
video,
one, it's
go
about
check
to
it
pop
out,
up
I'll
on the
link it.
screen.